5 years married. In the beginning, when something bothered me or when I felt disconnected or when I needed something from him, I would try to explain it. I'd sit down with him, choose my words carefully, make sure I wasn't being accusatory or attacking. I'd use "I feel" statements like every relationship article and therapist and advice column said to use. I feel disconnected when we don't spend quality time together. I feel hurt when you work late without letting me know. I feel lonely even though we're in the same room. He'd listen with this particular glazed look, like he was hearing words, but not really processing them, not letting them land anywhere that mattered. And when I'd finish, after I'd carefully articulated my feelings and my needs and what I was experiencing, he'd say, "Okay," in that same tone people use when you ask them to pick up milk on the way home. Just okay. Like I'd given him a minor task to add to his mental list, not opened up about something that was hurting me. Nothing would change after these conversations. Not his behavior, not his awareness, not the patterns that had prompted me to bring it up in the first place. So I'd try again a few weeks later, thinking maybe I hadn't been clear enough, maybe I'd used the wrong words, maybe if I explained it differently he'd finally understand what I was trying to say. I'd rephrase, reframe, try new angles. I genuinely believed that if I could just find the right combination of words, the perfect way to articulate what I needed, he'd finally get it. I thought the problem was my communication skills, not his willingness to hear me. I thought if I was just clearer, more specific, less emotional, more rational, better at explaining, if I perfected my delivery, then he'd understand and things would shift. I spent hours thinking about how to phrase things, rehearsing conversations in my head, reading articles about effective communication in marriage. All that effort, all that careful word selection, all that emotional labor of trying to make myself heard. Eventually, I got tired. Not suddenly, not all at once, but gradually, like water wearing away stone. Tired of explaining the same things over and over. Tired of articulating basic needs that shouldn't require articulation, that I needed him to be present, not just physically in the room, but actually present, actually engaged, actually with me instead of a million miles away in his head while his body sat on our couch. Tired of breaking down why it hurt when he'd text me at 7 p.m. to say he was working late, after I'd already cooked dinner and set the table and planned my evening around eating together. It wasn't about the late work. I understood work could be demanding. It was about the pattern of not considering me enough to give me a heads up, of treating my time and my effort as less important than whatever he was doing. But explaining that nuance, that it wasn't the action itself, but what the action represented, was exhausting. Tired of explaining that sex without emotional connection felt empty, mechanical, like going through motions with a stranger who happened to live in my house. That I needed to feel wanted outside the bedroom, seen as a person, not just a body available for his convenience. That intimacy required more than just physical proximity. I'd tried to explain this so many times, in so many different ways, and he'd say he understood, but nothing about how he treated me suggested he'd heard anything I said. Tired of pointing out that I shouldn't have to ask him to care about my life. That "how was your day?" shouldn't be a question I had to prompt. That interest in my work and my friends and my thoughts should be automatic, natural, part of what it means to be married to someone. But he never asked unless I'd already started talking, and even then his attention would drift within minutes, and I'd find myself competing with his phone for basic acknowledgement of my existence. Each conversation felt like screaming into a void. I'd pour out my feelings, my needs, my hurt, and it would just disappear into nothing, absorbed by air, leaving no mark, creating no change. He'd nod at the right moments, maybe apologize with that particular apologetic tone that meant he was sorry I was upset, but not sorry about his behavior. He'd promise to try harder, to be more present, to think about what I'd said. A week later, same exact patterns, like the conversation had never happened. I started keeping a mental list of things I'd stopped bringing up because what was the point? His gaming addiction, and yes, it was an addiction when he'd spend 6 hours every night escaping into screens while I existed in the other room. His complete lack of interest in my career, never asking about projects I was working on or challenges I was facing or victories I'd achieved. The way he'd perk up and become animated around other women, coworkers, friends' wives, strangers at parties, but drag around me like I was exhausting to be near. How he remembered his coworkers' kids' names, their ages, their activities, could talk about them in detail, but consistently forgot my best friend's name even though I'd known her for 15 years and talked about her regularly. The way he'd say yes to everything I asked, yes, he'd do the dishes, yes, he'd pick up groceries, yes, he'd make that appointment, yes, he'd remember that dinner, but then do absolutely nothing. The yes meant nothing. They were just words to end the conversation, not commitments he intended to keep. I stopped explaining why the dishes sitting in the sink for 3 days bothered me. Stopped explaining that I needed help with household management, not just occasional participation when I explicitly asked. Stopped explaining that mental load meant I was carrying the entire cognitive burden of our life together, remembering, planning, organizing, managing, while he just showed up and existed in the space I maintained. The list grew longer. His tendency to interrupt me mid-sentence, but expect complete silence when he was talking. The way he'd describe his day in detail, but zone out when I described mine. How he'd make plans without consulting me, then get annoyed if I had a conflict. How he'd scroll through his phone during dinner, during conversations, during moments when I was trying to connect with him. Each item on that mental list represented a conversation I'd had that went nowhere, an explanation that fell on deaf ears, an attempt at connection that hit a wall. Sometimes I'd wonder if I was the problem. If I was too demanding, too needy, expecting too much. Maybe other wives didn't need their husbands to ask about their day. Maybe I was being unreasonable, wanting emotional connection along with physical intimacy. Maybe I should just be grateful he wasn't cheating or abusive, that he had a job and came home most nights, that the marriage looked fine from the outside. But then I'd think about how exhausting it was to live this way. To constantly translate my needs into language he might understand, to carefully package my feelings so they wouldn't seem like attacks, to explain and re-explain basic concepts of partnership and consideration. And I'd realize that maybe the problem wasn't that I was asking for too much. Maybe the problem was that I was getting too little and had normalized it so completely that asking for the bare minimum felt like demanding the impossible. I'd make excuses for him to my friends when they'd point out the imbalance. He's just not naturally communicative, I'd say, as if communication was a genetic trait instead of a choice. He shows love differently, though I couldn't actually identify how he showed love when I thought about it honestly. The excuses were getting thinner, harder to believe, more obviously false even as I said them. There were moments I'd catch myself mid-explanation and think, why am I still doing this? Why was I still trying to make someone understand me who demonstrated repeatedly that he didn't want to? Why was I expending all this energy on someone who gave me nothing back? But stopping meant admitting something I wasn't ready to admit. So I'd push through the doubt and try one more time, use one more combination of words, hope this time would be different. There was a Tuesday, completely ordinary, nothing special about it. I came home from work excited about something that had happened, a breakthrough on a project I'd been struggling with for weeks, a moment of clarity that had made everything click into place. I walked in and started telling him about it, the words tumbling out because I was genuinely excited and wanted to share this win with my partner. He was on the couch with his phone. "That's great, babe," he said without looking up. Not, "What happened?" Not, "Tell me about it." Not even basic curiosity about something that clearly mattered to me. Just, "That's great, babe," the minimum required response to acknowledge I'd spoken. And I just stopped talking mid-sentence. Literally stopped, words dying in my throat, because I realized with sudden clarity that he hadn't actually asked what happened. He'd given me the placeholder response that meant he wasn't listening and didn't care to listen. Standing there in our living room, silence filling the space where my excitement had been, I understood something I'd been avoiding for years. I was too tired to explain, again, that I needed a partner who actually wanted to hear about my life. Too tired to articulate that "that's great, babe," without eye contact or follow-up questions wasn't support. Too tired to break down why this moment, this small ordinary moment, was another example of a larger pattern of not caring. I'd spent 5 years trying to explain my way into being valued, trying to find the perfect words that would make him see me, hear me, care about me. But you can't explain someone into caring. You can't articulate someone into being present. You can't communicate your way into mattering to someone who's fundamentally uninterested. All the careful phrasing and I feel statements and attempts at connection, none of it had worked because the problem wasn't my communication skills. The problem was his unwillingness to actually listen. Getting tired had become routine. I was tired of explaining, tired of trying, tired of hoping this conversation would be different, tired of translating my basic needs into digestible language, tired of being the only one working at this marriage. And maybe I thought standing there in the silence, maybe being tired was actually clarity. Maybe exhaustion was my body's way of telling me something my mind had been refusing to see, that I deserved someone who wanted to hear about my breakthrough without being asked to care. If you've spent years carefully explaining your needs to someone who nods but never changes, you're not wrong for finally being too tired to keep trying. Many have shared in the comments about their own explanation fatigue, that moment when they realized no combination of words would work on someone fundamentally unwilling to hear them. If this resonates, this space continues for those who've stopped explaining and started seeing clearly.